And as the sign says on the wall behind me, we say, welcome to all. We are glad that you're here. Those in the auditorium and those who are watching on Facebook and on YouTube. We're here to study about Jesus in a class called Up Close with Jesus. Thee and the disciple, that's John, thee and the disciple whom he loved. This is a study of the book of John. Before we get into that study, let me alert you to some new online Bible video offerings. Sunday nights with Michael. Every Sunday night at 9 o'clock, I'm going to tackle one of the great questions that has been given to me over the past 48 years. These are some tough questions, like the question from the woman who had been baptized multiple times. How do I know that my sins are forgiven? Or the question, what's the big deal about baptism? Or what happens to us when we die? What happens to us when we die? We'll be looking at a lot of these big questions that have been given to me over 48 years. That's Sunday nights with Michael every 9 o'clock on Sunday night. This is approximately 25 minutes long. Then every Saturday, and it started yesterday, we have the study of Matthew, the arrival of the King. By the way, a free study guide is available back by the fake palm tree, or you can have it sent to you every week by email in your email folder. Another class, Philippians. The book of Philippians may just be the most positive, the most uplifting, the most encouraging of all the books of the Bible. We're going to rejoice with Paul as he writes to the church at Philippi. This will be airing every Wednesday at 9 o'clock. Bible investigation. I am backing out of Bible investigation. We're going to turn that over to Josh. I know he's going to do a great job. By the way, we're all excited because Josh has arrived. He's with us today. Bible investigation airs Monday through Friday at 9 o'clock at night. Are you looking for a way to get your friends into a Bible study? You know, they may not be willing to make a big commitment, but how about just 2 minutes? Airing every day, 7 days a week at 7 o'clock, 2 minutes for encouragement. This is just a short, uplifting, positive message of encouragement from God's Word. Now, that study has already generated 2 new Christians. A Bible study started from watching this, and 2 new Christians was the result. I'm looking for number 3. Now, we all have friends who are just, they're not interested in the Bible. You say, hey, I want to invite you to come to church with me. They're not interested. They're not interested in the Bible. They're just not interested in God. This is the back door. 2 minutes to a better family life. This is family and marriage tips. Just takes 2 minutes. And why I don't mention the Bible in this one class, the Bible is certainly behind everything that I do. So this is a way to get your friends involved and maybe down the road into something more meaningful. 2 minutes to a better family life. Our elders are encouraging us to look at sharing our faith this year. The passage today, Romans 1:16. For I am not ashamed. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. For why? It is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes. For the Jews first and also for the Greek. Now, up close with Jesus via the disciple whom he loved. Most likely at the end of this class, we will be into chapter 6. Did you know that chapter 6 of John is critical? Chapter 6 is super critical. Because chapter 6 has something that John doesn't do. His book, the book of John, is so different from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Very different from Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew, Mark, and Luke primarily focus on Galilee, the ministry in Galilee. The book of John focuses on Judea, primarily Jerusalem. But here in John 6, he tells about a miracle, a big miracle. We're going to talk about why this miracle was a big miracle and why it is the only miracle mentioned in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. John did not want to repeat what Matthew, Mark, and Luke had already told. So why does he repeat this miracle? Guess what? There is a reason. A big reason that we're going to look at when we get to John chapter 6. Also, John chapter 6 is critical because we're probably coming into close to about the last year or so of the ministry of Jesus. And the crowds are there. And then suddenly the crowds are not there. Why do they leave? What causes that? And why do the disciples, the 12 disciples, why do they stay? We'll look at that in just a moment. But before we do that, we need to wrap up chapter 5. At the end of every chapter, we have these review questions just to make sure that we know what happened in the chapter. Let's look at review. We're up to question 14. What? What did the healed man do after he spoke with Jesus a second time? What did the healed man do? Now, if you don't have these questions, I need a man to, Xander, I'm going to volunteer you. If you don't have these questions, Xander is going to walk around here. Just hold up your hand and he will give you the questions. What's on the podiums back there is chapter 6. What did the healed man, this man who, boy, he was blessed. Jesus had singled him out. Out of all the people around that pool, he's the one that gets healed. He's the one that is blessed. What did this man do after he spoke with Jesus a second time? What did he do after he spoke with Jesus a second time? He tattles. I'm telling you right now, I'm getting to the point I don't like this man that much. I mean, he's not grateful, and he's what? He's covering his tracks. The Jewish leadership had asked him, well, who healed you? Who told you to carry that bed? And he didn't know. So when he finds out, he goes and tells the Jewish leadership, I'm not real pleased with this man. How about you? So why, question 15, why did the Jews, and let's just go ahead and answer the blue question. Who were these Jews? This was the leadership, primarily the leadership in Jerusalem. Jesus was a threat to their power base, to their position, to their popularity. And they don't like that. They don't like that at all. So why did the Jews persecute Jesus? Because he had healed a man on the Sabbath. they had a very twisted perspective on what is important to God. They had elevated in their mind, with all their rules, with all their traditions, they had elevated a day above God, above what God would want to see happen. So question 16, whose work did Jesus do? Look at verse 17. By the way, I give you the answer verses in every one of these. Whose work is Jesus doing? He says, I'm doing the Father's work. I'm doing the Father's work. In other words, I'm doing God's work. Don't you realize that? So why did these Jews want to kill Jesus now? He did not only do a miracle on the Sabbath. He is saying that he is God's son. That's putting him in the Jewish mind. A son was a direct reflection of the Father. So Jesus is putting himself on par. He's putting himself on par with God the Father. And these Jewish leaders, in their fine robes and all their religious stuff they had on, they don't like that. What did Jesus say the Son could do? Look there at verse number 19. What could the Son do? The Son only does what the Father does. The Son is mimicking the Father. The Son is a reflection of the Father. These Jewish leaders should have been the first one to recognize this. They're the ones that supposedly know the Old Testament. And what does the Old Testament do for us? It paints us a picture of the coming Messiah. And they're just turning their backs on what was obvious. Question 19. What did Jesus tell the Jews that he would show them? Look at verse number 20. You think all these works are pretty great? Guess what? I'm going to show you greater works. Greater works. Jesus would do mighty miracles. Each miracle was the testimony of the power of God working through him. We're just a little while, and we're going to see a mighty miracle, the feeding of the 5,000. And we're going to see how Jesus is connecting with Moses, who fed the Israelites with the manna from God. And we're going to see Jesus take a step further. He's going to do a better job, greater works. He will be resurrected by the power of God. His power will be multiplied into these 12 men, Matthias replacing Judas, and they will have a tremendous impact on the world. Question 20. Why did God entrust judgment to Jesus? You know, it's his words that will judge us. It's his commandments that will judge us. God has entrusted judgment to Jesus so that people would honor the Son. God, the Father, is honoring the Son. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. God spoke from the heavens and put his stamp of approval on Jesus and on his ministry. On the second time, at the Transfiguration, God said, you hear him. Don't listen to Moses. Don't listen to Elijah. You listen to Jesus. How did Jesus say a person can gain eternal life? This is so important. Let's read it again. Verse number 24. Most assuredly. Put this down. This is a promise. This is a guarantee. You can bank on it. Most assuredly, I say to you, he who hears. Now, I'm not hearing very well right now. My processor is off in California. Zero, I'm deaf over here. I'm struggling with the hearing. But he who hears my words. That word hear means not just verbally, it means putting it into your life. He who hears my word and believes in him who sent me, that's God the Father, has everlasting life. You know, God could have done it in so many different ways. Let's just admit it. God could have done it in so many different ways. You know, God wanted to, he could speak from the heavens once a year on January 1st. The whole world would hear that voice. And then we have an option, either to believe or to reject. But God didn't do that. He entrusted that message to people like you and me. Isn't that amazing that he would do that? That's our God. Question 22. What did Jesus say the Father had granted the Son to do? What can he do? Life. Life of himself. We gain life through the Son. We have that relationship with God because of the Son. What time did Jesus say was coming? The judgment is coming. When those in the grave will be resurrected. When is it going to happen? Guess what? We don't know. But it will happen. That's a promise. Question 24. Whose testimony did Jesus say was valid? Look at verse 31. If I bear witness of myself, if I was the only one saying it, my witness is not true. Anyone can say anything. There is another who bears witness of me, and I know that the witness which he witnesses of me is true. We're going to trace it through John, but where did John get it? It's God. God is putting his stamp of approval. What did Jesus say John the Baptist did? What did he do? What did he do? Well, he bore witness. He is that light. He is the one that came to prepare the way for Jesus. So why did Jesus mention John's testimony? Because the people really, they held John in high regard. The common people held John in high regard. But remember what Mark said in Mark chapter 1? All of Judea was going out to him. Jesus mentions John's testimony because ultimately, God wants you all saved. Ultimately, God does not want to see anyone lost. Now, unfortunately, they will be lost, but God wants you saved. So what? What did Jesus say John was? He was that light. He was that lamp. You go to a cave tour, Every cave tour I've ever been associated with, they all have one thing in common. Sometime during the tour, they're going to turn off the lights. And Ed, when they turn off the lights, you can do this, and besides the wind that your hand creates, you cannot see that hand. It's that dark. And then what do? They turn on one little lamp. It could be a flashlight. It could be a match. Suddenly everything is illuminated. That's the power of light. And John was that lamp. He did a great job. In fact, Jesus said, no one has been born greater than John. Now he adds, but those who are a true servant, you're great. Question 28. What did Jesus say testified to the fact that the Father had sent him? All the works, the miracles, but also what Jesus was doing, the words. All of that testified to who Jesus really was. Who else did Jesus say testified about him? God. God. Jewish leadership, you're not rejecting me. You're rejecting God. So why did the Jews study the Scriptures? You know, the Jewish people, they liked the fact that they were the covenant people. They were the ones that were given the covenant. They were given the Word. So why did the Jews study the Scriptures? Because they wanted eternal life. They wanted that eternity. They wanted that connection with God. Well, guess what, Jewish people? You have him standing right in front of you at this moment in John chapter 5. What was the result of all the Jews' study of the Scriptures? Let's look at verse 40. But you are not willing. You're not willing to come to me that you may have life. When Jesus approached the city of Jerusalem on that last journey, and when you approach the city of Jerusalem from the direction that he was coming, you have a good overall view of the city. He looks at that city, and what does he say? I wish I was like a chicken, a hen, gathering the chicks under the wings. You know, I've seen it so many times. If you ever raise chickens, which we did on the farm, if a threat came up, what did that mother hen do? Did that mother hen run away? No. That mother hen would just sit down and gather her chicks under her wings to hide those chicks. She would expose herself for the sake of saving her chicks. Jesus exposed himself to the cross to save you and me. He's like that mother hen. Jesus, you hit the nail on the head. You're like that mother hen that is protecting. He wanted to protect. You know, Jesus had no malice in his heart. For those soldiers that cracked the whip, for those Jewish people, those Jewish leaders who scorned him and ridiculed him and spit at him, all he wanted to do was give mankind the opportunity to be one with Jesus. The Jews should have known better. In the book of John, as we get closer to that last few days, John will say many of the chief priests believed. Well, why wouldn't they believe? I mean, it's all right there. Jesus is the fulfillment of everything. You know, sometimes when you're working a puzzle, you reach that point when it all suddenly comes, okay, I know what it is. You're putting together, maybe you don't know what the puzzle is going to be, and you're putting together pieces, and suddenly you say, okay, I know what it is. I know what that puzzle is. The Jews had all the pieces of the puzzle. They had it all. It should have been obvious. It should have been super obvious. What did Jesus' audience not have in their hearts? What are they missing? It's the love of God. You don't have the love of God in your heart. You're more concerned about your traditions, about the Sabbath, than over the welfare of this man. You don't have the love of God in your heart. Whose praise did the Jews neglect to seek? You know, one day, all of us will hopefully hear those wonderful words. Well done, good and faithful servant. That's the praise that we want. We don't need praise of man. Mankind will look down on us. We want the praise of God. Well done, good and faithful servant. When Stephen was about to die, Jesus, the only time Jesus is ever pictured standing, it's almost like he's saying, Stephen, it's okay. In a few moments, it's going to be okay. Just hang in there. I'm proud of you. Hang in there. God's praise is what we want. Who was the Jews' accuser? It's the scriptures, primarily Moses. Moses had written about the coming of Jesus. We'll talk more about that when we get into John 6. About whom did Moses write? He wrote about Jesus. The very first prophecy we have of Jesus is found where? In the book of Genesis. Who wrote the book of Genesis? By inspiration, it was Moses. You know, if the Jewish people had a Mount Rushmore, Mount Rushmore, we honor the great presidents. If the Jewish people had a Mount Rushmore, they would certainly have Abraham on it, Father Abraham. Well, they would certainly have King David, he's the king. They would certainly have Moses. He was a great lawgiver. Moses had told them about the coming of Jesus, and they're turning their backs on what they should have believed in. What effect should Moses' writing have had on the Jews? Well, they should have believed, but they refuse to believe. So, as we get ready to go in chapter 6, what did you learn from John chapter 5? Anyone want to speak up before I tell you what I learned from John 5? Anyone? Let me tell you what. Okay. Okay, Charlie just stole one of my 3 things. One, the identity of Jesus. It is obvious at this point. We're coming probably to the end, close to the end of the 2nd year of the ministry. Probably. He's been out about, he's been to Jerusalem, he's taught. This miracle here in Jerusalem should have proven it, but they turned their backs. Number 2, the importance of witness. Someone asked me a while back, why do we have the Old Testament? In fact, this woman said, I really don't like the Old Testament. I don't read it. I said to her, you're cheating yourself. Yeah, you're cheating yourself. Because the Old Testament is not just a bunch of words. It tells us so much about God, and it tells us so much about the coming of Jesus. And it tells us so much about what God expects from his people. So don't miss out on the Old Testament. The third thing that I learned from John chapter 5, we learn that his identity is definite. We learn about the importance of witness. The third thing I learned is don't be like these Jewish leaders. I don't want to be like them. I want to have an open heart always and an open mind. And I want to learn more. I want to know more about Jesus tomorrow than I do today. I want to know more about my Lord tomorrow than I do today. Now, lesson number 20, it's back on your podiums. Jesus feeds the 5,000. Notice I have a plus sign there. This miracle, as I said, in a few moments, we're going to talk about why John included it. This miracle is in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. When we merge all four accounts together, we learn some things. We learn that there's more than 5,000. It's 5,000 men, not counting women and children. How many women and children are there? Answer, I do not know. We assume that probably most of the men had a wife, okay? That's common, okay? So maybe close to 5,000 women, maybe, we don't know. How many children? Wow, that's a big question. How many children? Because Jewish families tended to have big families, lots of children. We got a lot of people that Jesus is going to feed with a little sack lunch. You talk about a miracle. This is a miracle. Let's first go ahead and read it, and then let's talk about it. Chapter 6. After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. By the time John is writing 50, maybe close to 60 years after the ministry of Jesus. He's writing after Matthew, Mark, and Luke had written, maybe 20, 30 years after them. At this time, the Sea of Galilee was most often called the Sea of Tiberias. We're going to look at a third name here in just a moment for this sea. Then a great multitude followed him. Why? Why did they follow him? Did they follow him because they loved his teaching? Did they follow him because they wanted to put his words into practice? Not really. Because they saw his signs. Remember the word sign in the book of John, just say miracle. They had seen the miracles. Because they saw his signs which he performed on those who were diseased. How many of us, by a show of hands right now, how many of us have a loved one? Someone in our family, a child, a grandchild, a parent, a grandparent, an aunt or uncle, a cousin, a niece or nephew that has health problems. I see most of our hands up. Guess what? 2,000 years ago, same thing. Lots of people had health problems. Hey, that guy is doing miracles and healing people. Wow, I want to be healed. I want my cousin healed. I want my aunt healed. I want my grandma healed. We need to go find this guy. And Jesus went up on the mountain. On the western side of the Sea of Galilee, certainly on the northwestern side, you have some low mountains. You have some higher mountains on the north and northeastern side. We call those today the Golan Heights. Jesus is getting away to have some time to be with his disciples, to give them a rest. They have been out teaching. They've been out doing. He's giving them a rest. He went up on the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. Now, we're going to circle in what time of the year. This is the spring. Now the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was near. This is the spring. Jesus is going to have the people to sit down on the grass. In the Synoptic Gospels, we learn that they're sitting in groups of 50 and 100. They're kind of divided up. And Jesus has them there. And Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, where? Philip, where shall we buy bread that these may eat? You know, in our sermon series, Questions That Jesus Wants to Ask You, we've already discovered that often Jesus would ask questions not for information. In fact, usually it was not for information. It was cause the person to think. It would cause a person to reflect. Here he asked Philip, and I find it interesting that he goes to Philip. You know, Philip, what do we know about Philip? His name has a Greek background. Now, he's Jewish, but it seems like his family was open to Greek ideas. They named their son Philip. That's a Greek name. Philip was kind of like the human calculator. He's the one that kind of looked at things and kind of figured out things. During the period leading up to the arrest, some Greeks will come to Philip wanting to meet Jesus. Philip made people, at least the Greek-speaking people, comfortable. So Jesus goes to Philip and says, where shall we buy bread? You know, there's not a Walmart for miles. Where are we going to get enough bread? Where shall we buy bread? But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii. What's a denarii? Well, one denarii was the common wage for the common laborer. Philip is saying 200 denarii. 200 denarii is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may have just a little, just a meager flake of the bread, just a piece of the bread. Now, why 200 denarii? Well, we don't know. I've always wondered if maybe in their common purse that they carried to pay for things, I wondered if 200 denarii might be what they had in their bag. Maybe that's the money they had. And Philip is saying, all the money we've got is not enough to feed all these people. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. Every time you see Andrew, He's bringing someone to Jesus. He's bringing someone to Jesus. He brings his brother to Jesus. He brings this little boy to Jesus. Later, he and Philip will bring those Greeks to Jesus. Andrew said to him, we got a little boy here. There's a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. That was the common way that people would pack a sack lunch back then. These fish would be dried, or they would be cured. You could pack them up with bread and have a little, what we would today call a sandwich. There's a boy here with 5 loaves and 2 small fish, but what are they among so many? It won't do it. It won't do it. Then Jesus said, make the people sit down. Jesus, If you have them sit down, they're going to expect. If you have them sit down, they're going to expect you to feed them. Don't do that. We're asking for trouble here. Make the people sit down. Now there was much grass. Remember, this is the spring of the year. Much grass in the place. So the men sit down and number about 5,000. Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, how many times do we see people in the New Testament giving thanks to God? Here, Jesus is setting the example. He gave thanks. He distributed them to his disciples. Notice, Jesus did not do the distributing. He depended on those 12 disciples to do it. Guess what? He is expecting you and I to distribute his word today. He gave it to his disciples, and the disciples to those sitting down, and likewise of the fish as much as they wanted. This is not, okay, you can have just a little bit. You know, this is not a communion cup. How much you want? You want some more? We have plenty. Here's some more. You still hungry? We'll give you some more. So when they were filled, he said to his disciples, we're going to do what's right. We're going to gather up the fragments. Gather up the fragments that remain so that nothing is lost. This is to once again prove that there's more than enough food produced. Therefore they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets. Why is 12 important in the Jewish mind? The 12 tribes. The 12 tribes. When he's going to be on the Gentile side, he's going to have 7. We'll talk about why 7 is important. Filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which were left over by those who had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, said, when they'd seen the miracle, this is truly the prophet. The prophet. Moses had written about a prophet to come. This is truly the prophet who is to come into the world. Jesus, on purpose, is setting up comparisons. Okay, we got 5 minutes. If you don't want to speak your question, you can text me your question. Jesus, on purpose, is setting himself up for comparison. Comparison to who? Moses. Moses. What did Moses do through the power of God? He fed the people in the wilderness. He gave them bread, he gave them meat. What is Jesus doing here? He's feeding the people, he's giving them bread, he's giving them meat. Moses bypassed God's created nature laws. How do you get bread? You plant the seed, you raise the plant, you harvest the grain, you bake it, there's your bread. Takes roughly 6 months. Moses, through the power of God, said, there it is right there, waiting for you. The manna, the sweet bread. Jesus right here is bypassing God's law of nature. He gives them bread. I mean, I can almost in my mind, he's breaking it off, and he keeps on breaking it off, and he gives them pieces, and he's giving them, and suddenly everybody's got, can you imagine feeding that many people? Now we got 5,000 men, maybe 5,000 women, I don't know how many children, maybe 5,000 or 10,000 children. We got a whole stadium full of people. And Jesus feeds them like it's nothing. We're going to resume. We're going to talk about, Lord willing, next Sunday, how this is a fulfillment of Moses, and we're going to talk about why. We haven't yet discovered why John includes it. Why, John, did you include it? We'll hold that off until next Sunday, because this is the only one that he includes that's in the other Gospels. Let's look at it and see if we have any questions. I don't have any questions listed. Thank you so much. You've been a great class. I appreciate it so much. Be sure to pick up your outlines in the back. Also, the outline for Acts for Wednesday is also in the back. You are dismissed. Thank you so much.